Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Goodcast Show. So today, you know what? Today's a very special day for me. I've always had this belief. My mom used to share this quote to me. She used to say, "Work the fields and the harvest is God's." And I think all the hard work that I've put in on this podcast is definitely paid off. This is a blessing from God, definitely, because I am today in the room that was once used by the great Syed Hussein Alatas. And today, my guest is his daughter, who's written a book, The Life in the Writing, Syed Hussein Alatas. This is a moment that I'm going to save the rest of my life to meet a member of the intellectual elite of this country and find out more about the man who has contributed so much. And if you can get his book at Gerak Budaya, The Life in the Writing, Syed Alatas, Syed Hussein Alatas, sorry, you'll find out just what an amazing man who had so many opinions, who was funny, who was just an intellectual that we will all miss. But without further ado, please welcome my guest, Mastura Alatas. How are you, ma'am?
Good afternoon. I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And of course, we have to shout out to Gerak Budaya as well for doing this, connecting us. And you guys can check out the book. The link will be in the descriptions of all the videos posted. So please get your copy and really savor this man who's such an amazing character and one I hope, I wish I could have had the pleasure to meet. Now, ma'am, your family is part, as I said, the elite intellectuals of this country. Your cousin is well known, Dato Syed Alatas, Syed Taufik, sorry, Alatas. Your brother is also a writer. You are a writer. You are a sociologist. What was it like for you growing up in this family of a father who's such an intellectual? Your uncle even was another great intellectual. What was it like?
Well, actually, I'm not a sociologist.
Okay, sorry, I cut that out.
I'm an English language teacher
Okay.
in Italy, and I'm a writer as well. I started out as a journalist in Malaysia with the Star, and then I continued writing after I went to Italy. But as a teacher, what was it like growing up in an intellectual family? Well, as there are environmental theories of education. What you are surrounded by, you imbibe. And as you can see, I was surrounded with books and an atmosphere of discussion, of talk. I mean, my father involved us even as children in everything. So we were not sort of kept out or blocked out of the serious, obtuse intellectual life. When people came around, the children we were allowed to meet the guests and talk to them and play. So we very early on in our lives learned to engage with people and with discussion and with books. And so it was. I guess it was just a natural process. Yeah. I mean, I became a teacher and a journalist and then a writer. My brother and sister joined academia, but we're all different in different fields, okay. And we focus on different things. Yeah.
Now, I want to get to the book because one thing that really caught my eye was that your father was among the founding members of Gerakan back when they actually had a substantial win over the Alliance, and then that led to the May 13 riots. Why? I mean, as you mentioned in the book as well, you talk about how it's very rare for a sociologist to become a politician. What was the need for your father at that time to say, hey, I'm going to be one among the founding members of Gerakan and take on the Alliance? Why did he do that?
Well, I think in some families and in some individuals, they take it upon themselves a kind of moral responsibility, do something for the people, do something for the nation, and of that generation especially. So, as an intellectual, he wanted to, put theory into practice. You want to see if certain ideas for the nation can be put into practice. And how do you do this? You form a political party.
Yes.
And he was also involved, with some political groups in Indonesia, the progressive Islam side, and of course, as a young student in Amsterdam, I mean, we're talking about the 1950s and then later the early 1960s as well. This was just after the war in Europe, and people were becoming very. They were developing their political consciousness. I mean, right after the war, universities were places of activism. So he was in that atmosphere, And yeah, it's not very common for a sociologist or an intellectual to also join politics. I mean, in my book, I mention a few names, people like in Italy, Benedetto Croce, or and don't forget Wang Gangwu. Professor Wang Gangwu was also one of the founding members of Gerakan, and he too, Chinese historian, very important for the region. So yeah, it's the next question is maybe intellectuals are not cut out for politics. That's usually the case in, and as you know, my father's, life in politics was quite erratic and quite short lived. Yeah, I would like to say that Gerakan was not the reason for the May 13 riots, but it was one of a series of chain reactions, and it was implicated by others. In some sense, just to
understand. Yes,
sure.
But I think their performance at the elections really was one of the reasons.
Yes,
definitely that
yes.
sparked that whole rise. Now, what was your father's opinion of the ruling elite then? Because, and again in your book, there is a line where you quote, if I'm not mistaken, I think one of his campaigning, when he was campaigning for Gerakan,
Yes.
where he condemned the ruling elite for preferring to build golf courses as to spend the money on understanding communal issues. So what was his opinion then?
Well, okay, all of this is in the archive. If you do research, as I did, you can find these newspaper clippings. And, well, his opinion then of the elite was the same. It remained constant. My father had a slight socialist inclination, and so of course, he renounced, he rejected the excesses of behavior in the elite or in the bourgeoisie of anywhere. So he led a rather modest, I wouldn't say Spartan, but a simple life. So the excesses represented to him a kind of, unnecessary overspending, the kind of decadence that may not be good for the country, may not be a good role model for younger, and of course, preference, right? I mean, he would much prefer a politician or the elite who reads books and writes rather than playing. It's his personal, but to no avail, because I wouldn't say half of Malaysia is covered with golf courses, but certainly, it's become a thing, an important part of the practice or the leisure
aspect of
the elite. So I mean, he just had his opinions, but nobody really ever took them seriously.
If he were alive today, what do you think his viewpoint will be on the current state of the party, Gerakan?
Well, he already knew that Gerakan had changed after it joined the government.
Yeah.
So I guess he was already disappointed that was the reason for his leaving the party. So Gerakan joined the government, and so be it.
Yeah.
And I think he lamented, has there been another truly cosmopolitan, multi-ethnic party in the opposition? Not really.
No, definitely not.
So I mean, my father's political life has to be looked at seriously and carefully, and I chose not to do it because, as a journalist, sometimes we believe that other people should write their own stories for the sake of objectivity, right? He was in the opposition, and then very reluctantly, he tried to join other parties, and then he had some direct dialogue with UMNO for a while, and then he just stayed in the margins of politics. As I say in my book, he had never had any official role, never on any official government committee or anything.
Yeah.
So, very much on the margins.
The interesting thing is, as preparing for this interview, I saw a video that was published by your cousin, Dato' Taufik. And he talked about how in the past during the because I think your father was at a time of politics in Malaysia where there were more statesmen than they were politicians. You know, you had people like Dato On.
Oh,
You had
okay.
these type of
Right.
really I mean,
The
people,
founding fathers.
yeah,
of
you
the
know what I mean.
nation,
Like they
yes,
had vision, and you know, as
Sure.
opposed to the what I have now, which
Sure.
is
Sure.
I don't want to say it out loud, but I guess you understand what I mean. But
Right.
and your cousin talks about how he points, he singles out Dato On, Tunku Rahman as really being people who
Right.
understood the people, understood what the definition of Malay. Who were some of the politicians then that your father looked highly upon?
Well, yeah, my father was also, very much close to Dato On bin Jaafar. So as a young, I mean, as a family member as
Yeah.
well. If you read in my book, how we're all related to some extent. But this is the generation that was born before the war. They grew up during the war. They experienced independence firsthand. So they really lived through colonial times, the war, and then the post-colonial, the reconstruction of Malaysia, so to speak. So they really felt it. They shouldered the responsibility of forming the nation. And Malaysia was a very different place. It was a much more, I use the word cosmopolitan, but I'm never sure if people really understand what that means, whether it's just a synonym for multi-ethnic or multicultural. But the way the races, and I'm using the word race, but the way, because it's used in Malaysia, it means something. The way the communities, the ethnic communities, the races interacted, it was kind of natural. And there was a formation of a truly cosmopolitan identity, which is missing today. Now it's much more. There are much more walls. There is one ethnic community, and then there is another, and then they all have they're all protecting, and so Malaysia is a very different place today, and so that kind of generation is, when with my father and Uncle Aziz and then my uncle, and that generation is coming to pass.
Unfortunately, yes.
And I think it's a very unique perspective that they had on the character of the elite is very different today.
Yes, definitely.
It is a ethno-nationalist. It has an ethno-nationalist character, which is also pro-capitalist. So, it's a different kind of elite, different interests.
Yeah.
So
Now, the interesting thing is, your father, after the whole performance election, then unfortunately came the May 13 riots, right? And at that point, he was in Singapore. Yeah. I'm just curious to get, because you do mention it in the book that him being in Singapore and all, but what was his thoughts about the entire situation? Did he ever talk about it? Did he ever share what his opinion was about everything that was happening at that time?
Well, I was a child. I was only 2 years old. Okay. So I obviously have no memory of that. And even the fact that he was in Singapore, I had to sort of ask him, were you really in Singapore? Or maybe you were in Penang? And then he said, or maybe you were overseas. And then he said, no, I had to be in Singapore because it was term time, university. He had his university duties. And then later, I don't know, with such a tragedy, and when you're a child and when you're growing up, my teenage years and everything, parents also tend to keep things from their children, not because it's a secret, but because they think, well...
You would understand the whole concept.
Yes.
The entire gravitas of the whole situation.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I do that with my own children too. There was a strong earthquake in Italy in 1997, and one of my sons was only a year old. And even today, I don't really talk to him about that, that day when the whole house shook. But not because it's a secret, but because you tend to,
shield
remove.
them.
Yeah, I mean, I might talk about it later. And in fact, we did talk about May 13th as I was working on the book. And he showed me some documents. He showed me some letters meaning, angry people writing to him about this is all your fault. And I mean, there's something in the book about that as well. The famous kambing berjanggut quote, right?
Yeah.
So he obviously he was not there. He didn't have the eyewitness account of the sociologist, the eyewitness, the possibility to witness things from the directly, with the sociological eye. He wasn't present in the thick of things, because the idea was that the others in the party, you know who the other names are, would be there, and then he would join them later in Penang for a separate celebration or something. But he was obviously looking at the media, analyzing things. He was writing letters to the. It's in the book. He was writing letters to the Straits Times, and also in Malaysia as well. At that time, Singapore, Straits Times, Malaysia, it was sort of one. He was demanding facts and figures. Tell us the truth. Lift the ban, the curfew. When is the emergency going to end? So, and then the Red Book came out a bit later.
Yeah.
Right? And he was asking for the official account. And then he also cleverly says, we need an official account so that we can contest it if there are other accounts, right? I mean, you can't talk about truth or non-truth. You need something to compare it to, right?
Definitely.
So he was demanding for facts and statistics and on where the violence was, the number of everything that you need to know to understand how violence can be sparked by a simple thing. There are also theories of violence. You need to understand how sometimes it may not even be the elections itself, which people are really angry about, but it could just be, you tap someone on the shoulder, you look at them angrily and, you
spark something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or you misunderstand something and you hear it as an insult. You can't control yourself, and then violence breaks out. This happens everywhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Even in demonstrations, peace demonstrations
Even.
can sometimes turn into, very, very violent. I learned all these things later when I was working on the book.
No, the thing about the book, then it also, as you mentioned just now, you talked about race in Malaysia, how it's such a, you talked about walls being very apparent in this country. One thing that happened after the riots was, of course, the social contract, right? Which it's not a fulfilled document, but it's something that's understood. In your opinion, has this social contract benefited the country in any way?
Has it benefited one community? Has
No,
it benefited
just the country
all?
as a whole.
I would have to say no. As long as there are many communities who feel left out and marginalized and are not benefiting the way others might, then it's not a social contract. It's a partial social contract. So, it's a tricky question because we have to understand what we mean by benefit, and then my very idealistic view, and perhaps my father would share that too, that it has to be thought out very, very carefully how the wealth that is produced in this country can be redistributed to benefit the disenfranchised of all races.
Correct.
So
interestingly, but interesting that you talk about that, because in the book you talk about how he, for example, when he was head of the Department of the Malay Studies, I think in NUS.
Yes. He founded.
He founded, right?
Yes.
So in the book you talk about how he founded a multicultural staff.
Yes.
Then you talk about Gerakan, it's a multicultural party.
Right.
Then there's a quote from him, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he sort of criticizes this notion of a superiority or an inclination of one race to become towards innovation or towards progress. It's not like that, right? It's not a race thing, it's an individual thing. Did he feel that the future of this country would be better held, will be better served using a multicultural approach?
Well, What do we mean by a multicultural approach?
Like, where, for example, if we were to, instead of use what we're using now, like things like using meritocracy,
Sure, sure.
those kind of things where a person is selected because they can do the job,
Sure,
not as opposed
sure.
to the color of the skin.
Well, the thing is, his approach was de facto multicultural, even academically. I mean, just look at all his references, and you can see that, he's quoting Chinese sources, Indian sources, European sources.
Yeah, yeah.
He was a truly cosmopolitan scholar in that sense. Neither Eurocentric nor Asia, Eastern or Islamocentric. He was truly cosmopolitan, like many are. But so in terms of politics, I suppose things just happened. Like-minded people get together. Ideas. I mean, V. David, Wang Gungwu, my father. I mean, there's you just, and of course, if you need, the sociological approach is that you need people who know their communities if you're going to form a multicultural party.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't have one claiming to know all. Then language, you need, language mediation, talk to the people. I mean, I have letters, I've seen letters written in Chinese, in Tamil. So of course my father would need the right people to go and interpret the letter and to talk to the people.
Correct.
So isn't it sort of a natural
thing, right?
that. And in terms of Singapore, it's the same thing. I mean, Malay studies had a very different meaning than it had today. I mean, we're talking about the Malay world, which includes Philippines, and the Philippines are Catholic Malays, and Indonesia, and Indonesians are a mixture of religions, even though Islam is the majority religion. But they also have animists. I mean, when you talk about the Malay world, it's so cosmopolitan. I mean, I'm trying to develop this idea of Nusantara cosmopolitanism or Malay cosmopolitanism, but I don't mean Malay as in
I see what it means today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. If you look at my father closely, I mean, obviously, some people might say, okay, he's also conservative, which is true. I mean, my father was not anti-monarchy by no stretch, of the imagination. Although he always spoke for an honest and clean monarchy. All over the world, we want. That class to represent the best ideals, not corrupt, not feudal, not so. But he was in some aspects, I mean, you could say that that's a way of sort of protecting so-called rights of one community. But I think if you really read him closely, you will understand that he's both radical. His conservatism does not cancel out some of his radical ideas. It doesn't compromise. It doesn't compromise some of. Otherwise, he wouldn't be. The party wouldn't have won a seat in a place like Penang. So
another interesting thing is, of course, his way of sort of interpreting or approaching the way Islam was practiced. He is also the author of the book Progressive Islam.
Yes, Progressive Islam is a periodical. It's a journal. I mean, it came out as a broadsheet. So yes.
And then he also wrote Socialism in Islam, right? He also wrote that book. Right?
Islam dan Sosialisme.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now the thing about him that I like, one thing I like for me, I always have that thought. Like, I feel knowledge can come from anywhere. Right? Wisdom can come from anywhere.
Sure.
Right? Of course, it doesn't mean that me being a Hindu or you has anything to do with it. So I like his approach where, like, as you mentioned, he was influenced by so many scholars from different parts of the world. It's such a, as you say, cosmopolitan approach to academia. And there's also one thing where you write in this book, where he talks about how works from Greek philosophers were translated to be made available to the Muslim world. I did not know this. Because growing up, you have this very perception of Islam as a very closed thing and all that.
Sure.
And you also talk about the golden knowledge age of Islam, right? It's all mentioned in this book.
Yes.
Why do you think this was possible in his time, but not so much today, where not where you get your knowledge from is always questioned if you are a Muslim. It's very it's a very touchy subject.
Okay, I'm not sure I, if I can answer your question directly, man. Let me try to do it obliquely. You see, I mean, given my father's background, his own heritage, and the fact that he lived in Europe for a while, we have to consider that even Islam around the world is very different from Islam in Malaysia.
Yeah.
So Islam, I mean, I also, I mean, having lived in Europe for so long, I'm in the basin of the Mediterranean. I'm surrounded by the Islamic world. I'm surrounded by North Africa, and then I've got, Turkey on this side, and which is called, the former capital of the eastern capital of the Roman Empire, Constantinople. So.
Wow, it's a nice spot to be in.
Yeah, but obviously it's also a very hot spot.
Yeah.
Hot spot in the sense that conflict. I mean, you know where the Mediterranean is in terms of the Middle East, and also Africa. I mean, if you look at if you read Ibn Battuta, you will know that he traveled all the way, down Africa to the Islamic countries.
Okay.
So, I think. Islam is truly, truly very different and varied. And if we are thinking of, if Malaysians think of Islam as only how it is practiced in Malaysia, then that's a form of, I don't know, parochialism.
Okay.
I mean, some Muslims themselves are surprised at the way, Islam is practiced here. But then we also have to think in terms of trends, how certain states, governments spread certain political trends. Something might... Islam is very strict in Saudi Arabia and Iran, and that trickles down influence, right? It trickles down to... and is absorbed and imitated in some sense by some of the most vulnerable places in the world. So, when we have to look at Malaysia, we have to think of the recent effects, the long-term sort of hangover effects of European imperialism, but also the more recent effects of Islamic imperialism.
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Another point that in this book that is discussed, which again I love, is there is I mean, of course, he's known for two books, the most popular books. One is The Myth of the Lazy Native, and then the Intellectuals book. So what's the title escapes me now.
Intellectuals in Developing Society.
Sorry, yes, thank you. And he talks about that and how important intellectuals are to sort of drive the political, economical, social direction of a country. But one thing that he questions, I think it's written in a letter if I'm not mistaken, but you talk about how the conditions are required to nurture intellectuals. So in your opinion, what sort of conditions should be there in a society to nurture the growth of intellectuals like your father?
These things are quite accidental. I mean, there's so many variables. Okay, there's family background. There's also individual talent, right? I mean, T.S. Eliot writes, the essay Tradition and Individual Talent. It's a very, I mean, that's
okay. I've not read that.
A small digression, but yes, there's family background, individual talent, and also your social and cultural milieu, where you grow up in and all that. But you see, I mean, in Italy, there's so many great intellectuals have come from very humble backgrounds. So I'm not making the class argument at all that you need to go to special schools or you need to have, a house stocked with books. I mean, I'm really talking about in all the creatives and scientific sectors as well.
Yeah.
Where Italy has Nobel Prize winners in the sciences and literature.
Yeah. You do mention that in the book as well. Yeah.
And I think I say something about Antonio Gramsci writing his prison notebooks in prison. I mean, that's certainly not a room like this,
definitely,
right?
Yeah.
So, and India, my father's always said that India, is one of the richest, most vibrant intellectual environments, atmosphere. So I really don't know how to answer that question. Indonesia as well, you know, and talking about Malaysia, Malaysia has wonderful talent. Okay, I mean, I don't live in. I mean, I come back to Malaysia every year. I keep up. I read. A great theatre, great journalists, cinema. It's wonderful cinema, wonderful writers, painters. You know, I see it everywhere, and you know, good academics, good intellectuals as well. So I'm really not, you know.
But just to build on that, because again, you talk in the book, right?
Yes.
You use this line. I think it's you quote about. I think it's an Italian scholar, if I'm not mistaken, where you say that he was celebrated locally first before he became world famous.
Right.
So could it be that, I don't know, when you're saying we have great painters and great, I'm thinking my goodness, I don't know who these people are. Is it our fault as well that we don't celebrate them too much?
But you see, it's not your fault. The point I was going to get to is that maybe I'm able to see all these things because I look for them because I'm abroad. But I was also going to say that we're not a cohesive, united, active group. We just isolated. You can see them here and there. Okay, it's not a group the way we can speak of, you know, I mean, French philosophers, Italian cinema filmmakers. I mean, it's a group. Iranian filmmakers, poets. Palestine. Palestine is one of the most. I mean, it's not one of it at this point in time. It's the most broken. It's one of the most broken places on the planet, and yet you have, you know, we can speak of a group of strong Palestinian voices and poets.
Really?
Yes. Please,
I
can tell. Yeah, I mean, you know,
despite that entire situation.
Yes, and well, you see, I mean, I'm wearing this pin because as a writer, you know, some of us in the collective, we are, whatever we talk about, it always comes back to this, because we're talking about conditions that produce writing, important writing. Poets have been killed, as you know. So, their poetry will live on, but, you know, it's the idea of producing something in very difficult conditions. Now, coming back to Malaysia, which is what I wanted to get to, Malaysians are producing things, good things, in far less difficult conditions. But maybe we haven't reached that stage where we can speak of that we are a cohesive, collective group that really is a strong voice and makes a difference. Maybe we're not desperate enough to reach, but you know, there is very good cinema in Malaysia, and but as pockets here and there. So
now again, to bring it back to Malaysia, as you said, one thing that I think we discussed before the interview as well was a speech that you did in Penang, when you talked about people not attaching the identity of being a Malaysian to you, in your father. In fact, the word Pseudo Malay was used, or Pseudo Arab, as you say.
Right.
And I know you touched on this briefly, but I think that after listening to your cousin as well, Dato' Taufik, talk about it, I feel like the term of Malay, the definition of Malay, is much, much bigger than what it is today.
Yes.
It's so... I mean, he was talking about South Philippines, as you mentioned, southern Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia. It's such a huge... which I had no idea about, to be honest, right? What was your father's definition for the term Malay, as opposed to what it means now?
Oh dear, off the cuff, my father's definition. I mean, as you know, there's the Constitution definition, which he has challenged in speeches, precisely because there are Malay Catholics. So if they're Malay Catholics, the constitutional definition cannot be so rigidly confined to, you know,
there were Malay Catholics once.
No, well, in the Philippines.
Philippines, okay. I thought here. Sorry.
But if you're speaking of the Malay as a you know, transnational group, I mean, when it suits them, some of them do speak of, you know, it's like the Enrique, the Malay slave who sailed around with Magellan. Then it's okay if he's Christian and Malay. Then that's okay if you're trying to make an argument about the first Malay. But yeah, I'm sorry. What was? what
No,
was,
as opposed to what the term is today.
That's right.
What was your father's sort of understanding or a definition for that word Malay?
Yeah, I mean, he certainly what I was saying before about the cosmopolitan Malay.
Okay.
I mean, my father is Arab.
Yeah,
so,
and correct me if I'm wrong, but you have influences from the Ottomans as well.
Yes.
It's crazy.
So we're not, if you want to talk about the ethnicity and the biology of it, and we are not Malay in that sense. I mean, certainly I'm mixed. If you look at my mother's who my mother was, so. You see, how are we defining Malay? Linguistically or ethnically or by religion? Now, let me, tell you that in Italian, Malay, Malayse, is applied across ethnicities. So,
okay.
If someone might say to me, "Oh, I met somebody and she's Malay, Lay Malayse," and I would already know that. They could mean she could be Chinese, Indian, or Malay, because the Italian it refers to the language. Somebody from Malaysia, because
Would
they
be
don't.
a Malay.
Yes, because in the 18th century, in the 19th century, an Italian writer was already referring to Malaysia as Malaysia, and so someone from Malaysia would be not Malay, okay, Malaysia. Somebody from Malaysia would be a Malayse, whether you're of Indian origin, Chinese origin, or. So,
wow, really?
Yeah, so in translation, people always ask me, do I translate this as Chinese Malay? In other words, if the person is of, right, Malayse di origine cinese, that would be Malay of Chinese origin. Do we translate it in English as a Chinese Malay? And I said, but that will create so much confusion. Yeah. So then I have to teach them that there is Malaysian as a as the adjective, yes. Yeah. So my father would agree that the definition of Malay, so you also have to look at language, and that, the construction of the Malay category, the definition of Malay is also a colonialist one, if you go back to how, the language was, so-called Malays of the region were speaking all different languages.
Yeah.
Although Malay was the lingua franca, it was the common language. So to answer your question, it's a very, it's a complex answer, but my father would look at, you're Malay too for an Italian, but you're Malay of Indian origin, right? Now Malaysians should not be upset anybody should not be upset to be called Malay. Yeah, if you're going to the Italian
side of things, yeah.
But of course today that's impossible, because we are so, the definition of the constitutional definition of Malay is so entrenched. No, I'm not Malay, I'm Indian. I'm Malaysian Indian. No, I'm not Malay, I'm Malaysian Chinese. So it's impossible to forge a truly common national identity through the language, right? And we all consider ourselves Malay. It's an impossible project, but who knows? Who knows? One day.
Yeah. Now, I want to go to the next part of this, another amazing revelation, if you will, for me, and I'm being very honest and sincere, because I think a lot of Malaysians just do not fathom the amount of time and effort and thought that went into the Rukunegara. Let's be very honest. I think a lot of Malaysians just think it's that 5 lines and then that's it. This was made by a government.
A whole document, yes.
So your father was among the group, the committee that actually drafted this whole document that formed the Rukunegara. Now, interestingly enough, when I read your way your father approached this, and that's the thing about him that I really like, is that whatever he did, he seems to have a vision. It wasn't just to do. He had something he wanted to accomplish. Like, he fought for a lot of changes in words, and he wanted a lot of implementations, a lot of other points put in, right?
That's right.
What were some of the points that he wanted, that he was the one who really said, no, this has to be in the Rukunegara, that finally made it there?
Oh dear, it's in the chapter in my book. It's
No, fair enough. I think that's too much of.
if we take a break, I can.
Oh, please,
check.
yeah, no, yeah. Please, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
But
No, I think
yeah.
it's fine. You can just,
I can't put my
I don't want you to fumble and all that.
no,
Too
but,
much of it. It's too silly of me.
I think it's. It is. It's an important question. I'm sorry, but I
No,
would
no,
just,
no worries.
to give
No,
them
because
a
I think
factual.
one of it that he talks about is that he talks about one thing that he really wanted, which I really liked, was about morality.
That's right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah,
How
and he
could I
wanted,
forget
and,
that?
and I like how he said, no, he wanted to put the phrase high standard of
Yes,
morality,
yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because yes, you're absolutely right. Thank you for refreshing. What I wrote in my. I'm just a little bit tired,
No
but
worries,
anyway.
no worries.
Yes, because it's about behavior, corruption, right? If you have a high standard, but also of morality to check your own behavior, it was his way of saying that everybody has the obligation not to be corrupt. I mean, it really brings you into his whole, his lifelong work against, if you talk about Islam and if you have certain if there's certain moral posturing about, then you should also
Right, yeah.
not engage in corruption. So this thing, it wasn't just about what kind of behavior, but it was also what's right and you know what's wrong.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's one thing. It's interesting that they bickered over that.
Yeah,
huh?
small things.
Yeah.
That's the thing, though. And I must say, this is maybe has nothing to do so much to him, but maybe it was a sign of the times. Like even in the letters that you share in this book, right?
Sure.
There seems to be a lot of thought in those letters, and I miss those times, like writing letters and the thought put into writing. The concept of as what we live in now, such a fast-paced world,
Right.
that everything is so I need it yesterday kind of thing. That seems to be a patience and a thought to it.
Right,
It's very
right.
nice. Now,
I mean, that's why I focused the book on writing.
yeah.
Because I really wanted to show how much work goes into a simple document and how much work went into the myth of the lazy native. It took years to get published. So
Yeah, it was very difficult. I think you write that in the start of the book as well.
Yeah,
Another thing about Rukunegara was that he warned. He warned that basically saying that if we don't teach this aggressively, I think the word was used was aggressively. I think that this document will end up just dying, basically
Sure.
losing its life.
Sure.
Do you think that your father's caution has come to reality now? Is reality now?
Yeah, I mean, nobody even knows the document.
Yes.
Nobody even reads it. I think that my chapter is called Malaysia a Place for Everyone. I mean, notice how the document ends. If you've seen the whole thing, I mean, and also if you read my chapter, people today talk of inclusivity, inclusiveness, but yeah, making every Malaysian feel that that Malaysia is theirs. But today we are still talking about who is the true Malaysian and who is the pendatang, who is the guest. So yeah, of course, for him, I mean that dream is not Malaysia is not a place for everyone if people don't feel that they are, that they are welcome.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Now I want to. You have written about your father, and who's an amazing man, and
There are parts about my mother as well.
yes, there is, how she was. I think there's one mention about how she sort of helped him convert his writings into
That's right.
because he liked to write and not
Yeah.
type.
Yeah, and she was, his main interlocutor. He would share, the struggles with her, and she traveled with him, and sacrifice. I mean, when you're starting out as a lecturer and you've got, and 3 children to raise, and so the usual.
I guess it's like the saying, behind every great man is a greater woman. So I guess that's how it should be. So to sum up her role in his life, definitely, I loved it. But how do you want your father remembered by Malaysia? I mean, by writing this book, of course, we are going to find out about this man. Right? I'm sure a lot of younger generation don't know of him. I'm sure there are people. How do you want us to actually remember him?
Well, the thing is, with writing books, you are always remembered if you are discovered. And, the library is the repository for discovery. So he will, I want him to be remembered in his writings, of course. And through his voice, I try to, in my book, I have, there's a chapter on quotes, right? I quote his direct speeches and all that, so that people can hear his voice.
Okay.
I would like him. I mean, I would like to see some of his ideals actually put into practice, when it comes to, not just politics and what I was talking about earlier about making feel every Malaysian belong, but also in the arts, in literature, in cinema, in everything. I would like, it shouldn't be a conscious thing, because the thing about any intellectual all over the world, any great writer, I mean, a lot of great writers are forgotten.
Yeah.
So that's inevitable.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
But I kind of like the idea of, to see a flourishing creative and products, right? And then I can say, oh yeah, there's something in my father there. Not consciously, not that the artist is consciously trying to, and it shouldn't be so imposed and affected and deliberate, let's do something about Alatas in our work. It should be the opposite around. It should be accidental. Like, something that all Malaysians can relate to. And then I say, yeah, okay, that's there's a little bit of him in there, and he's somehow remembered that way. So I think it's in the creative impulse that I would like him to be most, if not remembered, maybe applied. So, yeah.
I'm asking this as a father of a daughter. I have two daughters as well. It's a bit selfish of me to ask this question, but I really wanted to ask you. In this book, there are many moments where you share very memories of you spending time with him. Like, for example, you watching the World Cup with him, and you lying on the carpet with the bed, with a cushion and all that.
Right.
I think there's one where you are doing something and he's looking at you and smiling and all that kind of stuff. And I've done that many times,
of
right?
course.
Right. And this is a personal thing. Forget about the books. I don't the books and accolades, whatever, right? But what is it about your father that really made you, like? What do you remember? I mean, like, what are the traits that made you adore him the way that you do? That you remember as going, wow, that's my dad.
Yeah, well, he had this austere, serious side, but he was funny.
Yes,
And,
by his replies, yes.
Yes. And he, despite being so busy with his responsibilities at university, and he traveled a lot, and he was somehow always there, always present. And, he liked to talk. He liked to talk to us.
Okay.
It's kind of also a little bit of lonely. I mean, I think we're all like that. You spend hours alone writing, or you're in the office or whatever, and then you come home and you want to spend. He likes spending time with us, and I mean, there are so many things. He was funny and also very very natural. I mean, obviously we see the other side to him. I remember he once said, "Oh, I don't like to read when I give speeches. Unscripted."
Sorry.
No problem. And then I said, "Yeah, but I was already in secondary school, and I knew the importance of writing things down." And I said, "Yeah, but you might forget." And true enough, I think this was actually when he was in UM. He walked on stage and there were hundreds of people there, and he just went blank. He didn't have any paper to refer to. He didn't know what he was going to say on, to the crowd. And he just says, one moment. And he left. He said, "I have stage fright. I've forgotten. I don't know what to say." And I said, "Yeah, you see, you should have written everything down." But, he was very natural that way, very spontaneous. And of course he went back and, he did the, I think it had something to do with the Sheila Majid concert. So maybe, I remember that. So, it's these little things where you see, as a child, you learn how to be professional, but also when something, trips up or whatever, you learn how to be spontaneous and to, deal with it.
Nice. I mean, it's been really nice talking to you, and I think the book is just something that I just think everybody should have. I mean, you're right. I think that there are some replies he gave you in this book, in this little letter, which is so quick-hearted. I know the quotes that he talked about how sunbathing is the preoccupation of crocodiles. That's the best
quotable.
quote. Yeah, that's the best quote in the book, I think. It's so funny. So that's all we have for you guys today. It's with, of course, the amazing Masturah Alatas. And please get the book, The Life in the Writing, Syed Hussein Alatas. You know what? This has been such a blessing and an amazing moment in my life, being in the library of the great Syed Hussein Alatas. And thank you so much, Masturah, for doing this.
Thank you, Vinod. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And please have a safe trip, and hope to see you soon again.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does it end here?
Yes. I mean, I have to say a goodbye first.
Okay. Sorry.
I don't just want to cut off and
Okay.
So thank you guys again for watching. As always, the links will be shared. The book is The Life in the Writing, Syed Hussein Alatas. And if you guys want to get the book, the link will be there, and get your copy. It's really amazing. And you know what? It's a book you don't want to miss. So thank you all again. As always, like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you soon in the next episode. Take care. Bye.